Welcome to the Wander Mode podcast, where we celebrate the fearless spirit of women embracing life's wanderings. Where every story is a spark of inspiration and reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when we simply embrace wherever the journey may lead. Today on the podcast, we are diving into a subject that most of us dread, but it's one of the most crucial parts of running a successful business: taxes and bookkeeping. I am welcoming Amanda Stickel, an empowering tax accountant and strategic bookkeeper. She is here to help us make sense of all of it and has a gift for simplifying the complexities of finances and empowering women entrepreneurs to take control of their books, making tax season a little less terrifying. Thank you so much for chatting with me on the podcast today, Amanda. I want to start by having you tell me a little bit about your journey into the world of tax accounting and bookkeeping and what brought you into this career path.
Well, I want to start by saying thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and be a part of your podcast. And yeah, I call myself a strategic bookkeeper and empowering tax accountant. And what kind of led me on my journey was the unknown, really, because in high school, everybody always knew what they wanted to do when they graduated, and I never had a clue what I was going to do. Like, we had to do projects, like year-end projects, and I was like, I have no idea, and I just would pick random things. I finally was offered advanced classes because I took my core classes already in high school, and I was trying to get out of high school earlier, and my guidance counselor was like, no, we're going to stick you in some other things. I picked accounting and I was like, okay, let's go with this. We'll see how it goes. At least I'll be busy. And ever since the day one of that course, it clicked. It was just what made sense in my brain, and I stuck with it. So I ended up taking 2 college courses in high school and then just continued on my journey, got my degree in accounting and started working at a local accounting firm. Started having babies, and I actually struggled with postpartum depression, which led me to take that step of starting my own business so I could be home and be more flexible with schedules and take care of my kids and myself at the same time.
So I definitely want to expand on that a little bit, because I feel like most entrepreneurs that I talk to, there's kind of a pivotal moment in our lives in which it's like, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is no longer really serving me anymore. So here is the pivot that I need to make into having more control over my schedule. So can you expand a little bit on how that was at the time? Like, if you're struggling with postpartum and you're deciding I need to also go into entrepreneurship, like, that's not for the faint of heart. Like, so were there some struggles that you definitely had to tackle with that first in order to like get into the entrepreneurship field and mentality? Or was it really the breath of fresh air that you were looking for?
Oh man, it was definitely a journey. Yeah, there was lots of ups and downs. The initial decision point was very difficult for me. I actually applied for another job that paid more and had less hours. Thankfully, I didn't get that job. It was just a sign for me to really take a step back. My husband was super supportive. He's like, I'll do whatever we need to do to support our family and make sure that you are in a good place and able to take care of the kids. And it was a slow process. Initially, my boss actually gave me some side work, so I had that connection to kind of lead me into that path of business ownership. But the journey was very difficult because you have to learn that you aren't an employee. So like your rates specifically, like you can't charge somebody back then, like minimum wage was like $10 an hour. You can't charge somebody $10 an hour, especially when you have the knowledge and the skill sets, because it might take you 30 minutes because of your background when it could take the business owner themselves 5 hours to do it. Like you have to be smart with pricing. And there's 2 other big points that I had to learn was I don't have to say yes to everybody. That's definitely a struggle point for me as a people pleaser. I was just accepting clients initially and they weren't good fits. And it was very difficult relationship wise. I wasn't happy. It wasn't worth the money. So learning how to set my boundaries and know who I wanted to work with. And then also the scheduling is knowing when you want to work and when you can work. That was definitely a hard point for me, was setting those schedules and having boundaries and work-life balance instead of just working all the time and kind of putting like the kids to the side when the kids should have been the primary focus. And I've learned that since then.
Throughout this time, then, as you're building this new business, were the kids at home at the time? Like, what were their ages?
Yeah, so when I initially made that decision to be an entrepreneur instead of a full-time employee, my kids were 3 and 1 years old. And then I had another baby a year later. So I had 3 kids at home. And yeah, it was an interesting experience for sure, trying to balance it all.
My daughter right now is 3.5. So when you're saying, you had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and then you had another one follow, like I'm a year into entrepreneurship, but she goes to daycare. I literally can't imagine what that must have been like trying to juggle the needs of kids. And like you said, I really appreciate that you had to decide when you want to work versus when you can work. So what were some of the strategies that you utilized to find that time to actually build that business and those connections? Did you work in kind of the off hours, nap time? Did you and your husband go back and forth a lot with the responsibilities of I'm going to work during this time and you're going to watch the kids? Or how did that work?
Yeah, so my husband actually worked 2 to 3 jobs during that time of when I was just starting out. And I would work during nap time and nighttime and weekends when he was home. It was just kind of filling in the gaps when I could.
And I think that that's something that resonates a lot with me because my husband and I worked W-2 jobs. We had this side hustle that eventually grew and grew and grew. And then we had our daughter in 2020. And I think, as you were saying with your husband working multiple jobs, I think sometimes what people underestimate when they think about like, oh, I'm going to go out on my own is the amount of work and effort that takes up front from a planning perspective to be financially ready and capable of stepping into working for yourself. Like you said, you're no longer an employee anymore. You have to cover all of the things, insurance, and you have to kind of figure out if you're going to take time away, quote unquote, or vacation time. So tell me a little bit more about that. So your husband took on more jobs to cover you, but what are some common financial mistakes that you see small business owners or entrepreneurs making, or financially smart decisions that people make that you feel like actually get them to the point of success?
I would have to say from my experience and seeing other people's experiences as well, but it's not always the best choice. But if it's the only choice, but to use a credit card to really invest in yourself, I invested in a life coach to really work on my mindset. And this was just 5 years ago. So I had been in business for 6 years at that point, and I was still struggling with finding exactly my boundaries and speaking up for myself and not letting people walk all over myself. And I took this investment because we weren't in that financial place to really be able to pay upfront for anything. But I took this investment, I put it on a card, and I just focused on myself instead of everybody else. And that really took me to the next level in my business. And I think it's just being smart with how you use credit cards specifically, and looking for like interest-free timeframes where you can just pay things over time and not have to pay extra for interest. A big mistake that I see people do often is mixing their personal expenses with their business expenses. Like they only have one bank account and it's their personal checking account. That can make things really messy and confusing, and it's not good in the time if you were ever to be audited by the IRS. So definitely when you're starting your business, take the extra steps to create a business checking account. And you can transfer money in between those accounts, but just don't use your personal card for business stuff and don't use your business card for personal stuff.
For those that are listening who don't have as much financial sense. So when we're talking about like an IRS audit, for example, and the importance of having that business checking account and not mixing and matching, what are the repercussions of using your own personal account to pay for business expenses, et cetera? How is that viewed by the IRS?
So if you were to ever be audited, that kind of opens up more information than they need. So they could be finding more things that they wouldn't necessarily. It just is cleaner and more organized to have that separate bank account. It helps you have a better idea of where your business is financially. And if you need more for your personal life, that can help you set goals in your business. So that way, okay, I need $500 more in my personal account. That means I should probably have a goal of at least $500 in sales in my business account so that way I can transfer it over. But really, it just keeps things clean, organized, and it really keeps you protected, especially if you go the route of having like an LLC, which is a limited liability company. It provides your personal assets protection against any business liabilities that may happen. But if you're using your personal bank account for business stuff, or you're using your business account for personal transaction, that pretty much voids that LLC and you don't have that protection anymore. So there's multiple things that could happen. It's just better to be safe than sorry.
And I appreciate that too, because when we work with our clients, now we're in a little bit of a different industry with short-term rentals, but we say very much the same thing, that it's very low effort to create some of those really basic accounts up front to help you just keep your business and your personal life separate. And regardless of where the business goes or how quickly it expands, or maybe it doesn't and it falls flat on its face, it doesn't really matter. At least it's, like you're saying, a very, very clear picture. And I liked the idea of using the credit card to invest in yourself, especially some of those interest-free credit card options. So what were the steps that you took besides just having that credit card and choosing the right coach for you? And how long did you stay with that particular coach?
It definitely wasn't something I planned on. It was actually in the Boss Mom group where we actually met as well. And I just was at a point where I was feeling all these negative feelings and just overwhelmed and burnt out and sick of these clients that just weren't the right fit. And just scrolling on Facebook, I saw her post and it just was meant to be that I read it. And she literally touched on all the points that I was feeling. And yeah, I was like, I don't have the money for this, but I'm going to do what it takes to do this because I know it's what I need. And I want to say it was like a 6-week program. It wasn't super long, but she's now part of my community. She's in my network and we stay in touch. So it definitely built a good relationship for both of us to have each other on our sides.
So what Amanda's referring to is there is a community out there called Boss Mom Plus that Amanda and I are both a part of. And what is really beautiful about this group that Dana has created is that it's bringing moms together that have their own businesses to help support one another. And that can happen in a variety of ways. It can be talking about life. It can be talking about business. It can be asking for ideas on marketing. But you're absolutely right. The collaboration that's happening in that space is really something phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points in having a business is really creating community and making connections. That's always my number one piece of advice. I'm not a marketing expert, but in my experience, having a group of people that you are connected with has been more beneficial than like paying for ads, for example.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. I've taken a few of those free webinars on paying for ads and trying to come up with strategy and things like that. And I feel like it's driven some followers, I guess, for example. But I've been in Boss Mom Plus now for, I don't know, a month or two. And I would say I've taken more from the 2 free networking sessions that I've jumped into than those ads that I've paid for.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really getting to know other people and just find how you're connected. And then it's like word of mouth, basically.
Yes. One of the things that I want to go back to that you said that you consider yourself an empowering tax accountant. And as we're sitting here talking about community, I think that there's something very empowering about community and being around other women specifically that are doing the same thing. So can you tell me a little bit more about why you view yourself as an empowering tax accountant and how do you empower your clients through your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very common for me to meet with new clients, and the most common thing that they say is that they feel embarrassed, that they're scared, that they feel like they're stupid, that they should know these things, and just a lot of very negative thoughts and feelings around their numbers and taxes and all those things. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's very common to feel those things, and I think it's important to talk about the feelings because the more we talk about things, even if it is scary, we realize that we aren't alone and that other people are feeling and thinking the same things and struggling with the same things. I think it's hard, especially with social media, where people are always talking about 6-figure this, 7-figure that, and oh, I'm so successful. But they honestly are probably having the same struggles and thought processes as you are. But how I do the empowering process is I listen to them, I let them talk, and I let them know that they aren't alone and that it's not stupid to have questions. Taxes aren't something that's usually taught in school or in any other degrees. It's a very specific thing for some reason. And I like to take things and break it down really simply to not use like tax lingo and just make it make sense to people. So it's easy to grasp. It's something that they can implement and help them right away in their business.
It's really interesting that you started your answer with how people feel when they come to you, like stupid. I feel like I should know this because as you were listing those things, I would say, although I view myself as an intelligent, capable woman, I hands down feel very incapable and like I should know more about money than I do. Why do you think it is that so many women feel that way about themselves as it relates to money specifically?
I think for most of us, there's a long history of our mothers, and their experiences with finances and maybe not necessarily being in charge of money. I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was like 1980 or something, where women couldn't even have a bank account without a male figure being the primary owner of the account or something. It's just insane. And I think that has a lot to do with it. There's definitely a lot of money mindset struggles where we kind of absorb what our parents or parental figures experienced while we were growing up. We take in what we see like teachers talk about and other students talk about when we're in school. And then social media is a big aspect as well, where people put on a front basically. They want to look a certain way, so they talk about money so extravagantly, and it might not be the real picture, but we don't know that, and that can make us feel less of. So there's lots of things that go into it. It's definitely an intertangled web of mindset issues and societal things that I think we are learning from and growing from. I'll say even me having a background in taxes and accounting, I have my own personal money mindset struggles that I work on every single year, and I'm always growing and always learning. And I think that's really, really important as a business owner to always be in that learning mindset and always growing and developing.
As you were talking about your own struggles with money mindset, I know growing up, I was taught, and I don't know, maybe this was a common system or not, I don't know, but like the envelope system where like you put on the outside, like checking, savings, whatever, like you're giving to missionaries or whatever it is that you're going to give your money to. And then the money goes in there, but then it's like locked in there, right? Like it doesn't move between accounts, whatever. You can't shift anything. Equal amounts have to go to whatever. So I know at least for me, my money mindset tends to be very compartmentalized. Like I don't view things often to be very fluid, when I know in fact a lot of money management is kind of about being a lot more fluid and moving things between. Do you ever see anybody come to you with systems like that?
Yeah, I have, and there are systems like that in place, which I think there's a balance between that system and being fluid. I think that's finding the balance of what works best for you, but it can be beneficial. I think it depends too on how everybody's brain works. And that's another huge obstacle, is everybody learns and has different perspectives. And it's interesting because you have to find how people think and then find the systems that work best for them.
Yeah. And I think that that's the part in working with other individuals, and sort of what you said at the beginning, right? Is that you have to find the right people to work with you, and you have to be the right person for other people, because we all do think about things so differently, and you have to figure out your approach to how you can help somebody within their own capabilities and like their own systems and their own needs.
Exactly. Yeah.
Would you say that being in this field, this is a field that has a lot of changes over time? Like, are there future trends or directions that this industry is going that you have to prepare yourself for? Or would you say taxes and accounting, it kind of is set as the industry that it is, and there isn't a lot of things that change about it from day to day or year to year?
I would say tax law always changes, but in general, in the industry, I think changes are more so that people, like business owners, are being more open to the virtual setting ever since COVID. Because my business has always been virtual, and I've always gotten a little bit of pushback, like, how are you virtual? But now more people are more open to that and more accepting. So I think that's a big change that we've seen kind of happening since the past 3-4 years. And I think that's a good change. With that change, though, there's more a need for security, like good computer security, internet security, to avoid identity theft and fraudulent things happening. So I think those are changes, but I don't think they're bad changes. And then with taxes, you kind of don't really know what's going to happen until it's set in law and signed and it's for sure happening. But yeah, small things change every year, and that's why having the internet and virtual stuff is so important, because it allows other tax accountants to be able to continually learn easily and have instant access to those new laws, and always taking like continuing education courses and being a part of conventions to talk with other professionals and Facebook groups full of other professionals to be able to go back and forth about our thoughts about how we interpret the law and strategies and all those things.
Based on that and where we're sitting today, especially as you're talking about technology and identity theft and things like that, what would you recommend as far as some good bookkeeping practices? And what are maybe some of the technological platforms that you would recommend that would be good to use, both from just an ease of use perspective, but also a security perspective if you're managing your own bookkeeping or even preparing for someone else to help you with it, I guess?
Yeah, as far as security, I would say look into a good VPN. So it protects your IP address and where you're located. And I'm not an IT person, but I know that's important to have to protect your data, and having good passwords and having a place that's secure where you can keep all your passwords. So not having them in like an open Google file, someplace that's actually secure. I use LastPass, so it holds all your passwords, and it's very hard to get into even when you know your password to get into LastPass. So I think that's a good software to have. But as far as like actual bookkeeping, it depends on your budget and kind of what you have going on in your business. But a good free option is Wave Accounting. It's very basic. You can connect it to your bank account and it pulls transactions through, and you just have to enter what they were for. Very basic, but it does what it needs to do. If you're ready to invest into a software for bookkeeping, QuickBooks Online is a great option. And I think they just came out with a new self-employed option, which is like $10 a month. And it also connects to your bank account, but it has a lot more resources if you need to do more with your bookkeeping or business, like invoicing and paying bills and tracking everything in one place. But those would be my top 2 recommendations.
And then based on that, at what point should somebody be hiring a tax accountant or a bookkeeper versus attempting to maybe do some of this stuff on their own? Or is it more just skill-based?
Yeah, I think at first depends on what you're comfortable with handling. Like if you want to do your own bookkeeping, you're probably more than capable of doing that. But I for sure recommend, though, if you are making 6 figures, which is 100 grand or more in sales, then you should be considering having a bookkeeper that you outsource to that handles it and kind of keeps you in line and keeps everything organized and in compliance. And then also working with a tax accountant at that point as well, too, because there are possibilities of tax strategies where we could potentially save you money in tax liability at the end of the year. But working with somebody throughout the year is important to be able to implement those strategies beforehand, because usually when it comes time to April 15th, it's too late to do really anything besides investing in an IRA account, which isn't always a significant strategy. It just depends.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we're so, I guess, headstrong about trying to do all aspects of our business ourselves, right? Especially at the beginning when you're not making a lot of money, you're trying to keep as much in-house as possible in order to save every dime because you're not making anything. But to your point too, though, at some point, outsourcing really is the better use of your time and potentially saving you money down the road versus attempting to do it yourself when that's really not your strong suit.
Exactly. And it's a tax deduction to have an accountant on your books. So you can write off your bookkeeping fees, you can write off QuickBooks, you can write off your tax prep fees for your business, all things that help lower your tax liability.
Well, see, there you go. Just another reason why it's so important to hire that out. So one of the questions that I want to end with is if you were to go back in time to that moment when you chose to go out on your own and shift into this ability to have more control over your time and your job and things like that, what would you have said are the things that you would do again? And what are a few of the things that you would have done very differently?
So I don't think I would do anything differently because even though it was a very difficult journey that I experienced, there was so many learning points in my life about who I am, who other people are, and what I want and what I'm capable of, that I wouldn't want to get rid of those experiences. If anything, I would keep all of the learning experiences, but have the courage to work on myself sooner. So that way I could have the confidence and be able to set my boundaries and be able to say no to people and really stand strong in who I am. At the same time, like without those experiences, I don't think I would have been able to be who I am today, which I'm so grateful for. I guess I'll say, if you are struggling right now, don't give up. Like, just take it, and you are so strong and it will work. Have support system. Like for me, it really was my husband. I'm not like a big social person, so he was definitely my support system, but that may look differently for you. It's really just rely on them and lean on them and talk about what you're feeling and experiencing. I think that's the biggest thing to help you get through this journey if you are struggling. And it's going to help you be a better person when you are past that experience.
I loved what you said about the support system piece. I think the support system piece looks a little different for all of us, as you said. That could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a fellow entrepreneur, but having somebody who is going through something similar to yourself, or at least is willing to be a listening ear, is so critical. Because I know for me, I left teaching after 16 years to do this. And in teaching, I had this built-in support system of other teachers that I worked really closely with for a long time. And it was just constant listening ears and people that understood. And all of a sudden now I'm working on my own in a home office and I don't have friends who are in the same space as I am. And so it can feel very isolating. And I think there are a lot of highs and lows, as you said, where it's like, oh, I could do this for the next 10 years. Oh my goodness, I'm not making any money. I need to give this up. I need to go back and find my a full-time job. And those are a lot of highs and lows. And so even finding communities like a Boss Mom, or I know there's just tons of Facebook groups and other things out there too, but finding your people.
Yes, definitely. And another thing, I think it depends on the person too. I've always heard like having a word of the year, and I was like, oh, that's silly. But I finally did that very seriously this year, and it's actually helped me. So I picked joy, and it's always in the back of my mind, and I'm always thinking, how can I find joy in this moment? And I think it's just really helpful to help shift that mindset, really, of finding the good in maybe not necessarily the best situation.
Yeah, because that can be a real mood shifter for sure when you step back and look at these things might not be going well. However, look at what I've gained. I just had to do a journal entry myself to get my head back into a more positive space. And I literally that's what I did. I took a lot of time to write down what is going well. How far have I come? What improvements have I made?
Yeah, it seems like such an easy task, or is it simple but not easy? whatever way it goes. But it takes some hard work, but it's worth it for sure.
Let me ask one final question, just because it kind of sparked something in the back of my mind. But you said, no matter what, don't give up. What's your opinion on knowing when you're in something that you just have to get past the hard parts and like eventually it will take off, like it will work, even though right now it feels like such a struggle, compared to like understanding, okay, I thought this was a good idea, but it isn't, and now I kind of need to let it go?
Yeah, I think for me, like I'm very much of a trust my gut person and also relying on that support system. Now I have bigger support systems. So I have a business bestie where we always chat, but I think you really have to feel it out. I think you have the answers and it might not be the answer that you want, but ultimately you know what that answer is. And it might not be to let it go. I think that's another thing you mentioned with finances, to have it be fluid. That's another thing with business, is it doesn't have to be a set, strict way. I think we have to be more fluid in it. So we may have an idea and start to implement it, but then realize this isn't going exactly how I planned it and kind of get frustrated. And that's okay, feel the feelings, but I think then we have to shift and try something different. So kind of having it be more fluid and trying different ideas to see what lands and what fit for me. I definitely see how other people do their business and it can kind of influence me, and I try to do it that way, but I'm not like that person. So it's not going to work the same way for me, and I have to figure out the way that's going to work best for me for it to work organically. I think you know the answer, and be fluid.
So appreciate that. I was just talking with a gal and we were talking about that exact thing, that oftentimes we don't sit long enough with ourselves to really discover the answers that we already know are there. Like if we really just took some time to be silent and drown out the rest of the noise and other people's opinions and comparing ourselves to other accounts or other individuals or whatever, like we already do deep down know what the answers are. It's just whether or not we're going to take the time to hear them and also acknowledge them and then follow them.
Exactly. Yeah.
I so enjoyed chatting with you today, Amanda, and I'm feeling like we might need to have you back on for like a mastermind or something. I don't know, like help rid some of those thoughts of like, I know nothing, or I don't know where to start, or I feel stupid, or I should know more about this. Like just kind of a little boot camp podcast on here's some basics that might get you started.
Yeah, I could definitely come back and do something like that. And I'm also working on rebranding my Facebook community, and it actually houses over 50 videos that I have created of trainings for bookkeeping, taxes, and business finance stuff, and business support in general. So more than welcome to have you guys there and check it out and learn something.
Tell the listeners where it is that they can find you on social or a Facebook community or these videos.
So Facebook, the website link is Stickels Tax, so STICKELS TAX, and Instagram, it's amanda.stickel.ea. Either place, you'll find me, and I have all my links there.
Well, lovely. I will make sure to link all of Amanda's information in the podcast notes. And until I guess we come back and do our bookkeeping 101, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for wandering with me today. If you were inspired by this episode and think it would ignite a spark in a friend, don't hesitate to share. And if you're craving more from the Wander Mode community, hop on over to Instagram at WanderModeCo. Meet you in the next episode, and until then, wander on.